The Seoul skyline glittered like a field of stars, but Nia stood in the shadowed corner of a sleek, glass-walled office, her heart pounding. The city's glamour felt worlds away from the storm raging inside her. Her younger sister, Amara, had called her 2 days ago, sobbing, her voice trembling through the phone. A fake modeling agency had lured Amara with promises of fame, only to trap her in a web of debt. Hundreds of thousands of dollars she could never repay. Nia, a rising African model who'd clawed her way into Seoul's cutthroat fashion scene, felt the weight of her sister's desperation like a stone in her chest. She'd do anything to save her. Anything. That's why she stood here now, in a sterile office that smelled of leather and power, staring at a contract that could change her life. Hey everyone, we're so sorry. But most scenes in this story won't have images describing them because some words in our prompts didn't meet the platform's guidelines. This means the story will be more about listening than visuals, and we know that might not be what you expected. Please let us know in the comments if you'd rather we stop this story and start a fresh one with more visuals, as many scenes here won't have images. Your feedback means everything, so drop your thoughts below. Thank you so much for your support on this channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button and join our growing community at Jade Lantern Stories. Your support means a lot and helps us keep sharing more amazing stories. Now sit back, relax, and let the story begin. The pen in her hand trembled as she signed her name, Nia Adebayo, on the dotted line. Across the desk, Kong Jisoo, the man who'd become her husband by midnight, didn't even glance at her. His sharp jawline and cold, obsidian eyes stayed fixed on his phone, as if her presence was a minor inconvenience. He was a tycoon, a name whispered in boardrooms and feared in the streets, a man who built empires and broke lives with the same ruthless precision. His tailored black suit hugged his broad shoulders, and his dark hair fell just enough to soften the severity of his face, but there was nothing soft about him. "Done," Nia said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. She slid the contract toward him. Only then did he look up, his gaze slicing through her like a blade. "Good," he said, his voice low and clipped, laced with an accent that made every word sound deliberate. He stood towering over her and leaned forward, his hands bracing the desk. "Let's be clear, Miss Adebayo. This isn't love. It's business. Don't catch feelings." Her breath caught, not from his words but from the intensity of his stare. It pinned her in place, made her feel small yet strangely alive. She lifted her chin, her dark eyes meeting his. "Don't worry, Mr. Kong. I'm not here for your heart." His lips twitched, a flicker of something, amusement maybe, before it vanished. "Smart girl," he muttered, then turned away, dismissing her with a wave. "My driver will take you to the penthouse. Be ready for the photo shoot tomorrow." Nia's stomach twisted as she left the office, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She just signed away a year of her life to a man who looked at her like she was a contract clause, not a woman. But Amara's tear-streaked face haunted her. This was the only way to save her sister. She'd play the perfect wife, smile for the cameras, and keep her heart locked tight. She had to. The next evening, Nia stood in a lavish hotel suite, surrounded by photographers and stylists buzzing like bees. The honeymoon photo shoot was a farce, a staged spectacle to sell their marriage to the public. Kang's PR team had crafted a narrative, the cold billionaire tamed by the exotic model. Nia's stomach churned at the lie, but she slipped into the role effortlessly, her years on runways teaching her how to wear a mask. She wore a flowing white dress that clung to her curves, the silk catching the light as she posed on a balcony overlooking the Han River. Kong stood beside her, his arm around her waist, his touch firm but impersonal. The photographers shouted directions. "Closer! Smile like you love him!" And Nia forced a radiant smile, tilting her head toward him. His scent, cedarwood and spice, filled her senses, and she hated how it made her pulse quicken. "Relax," Kong murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "You're too stiff." She turned her head, their faces inches apart. "Maybe if you didn't hold me like I'm a prop I'd look happier," she whispered back, her voice sharp. His eyes darkened, and for a moment she thought he'd snap at her. Instead, his grip tightened, pulling her closer until her body pressed against his. "Better?" he asked, his voice low, almost taunting. Her breath hitched. The heat of his body seeped through her dress, and the cameras flashed, capturing the moment. She felt the weight of his hand on her hip, the way his fingers pressed just a little too firmly, and her skin burned under his touch. This was supposed to be fake, but the electricity between them felt dangerously real. "Perfect!" the photographer shouted. "Now kiss her." Nia froze. They hadn't discussed this. Kang's jaw tightened, but he didn't hesitate. He tilted her chin up with a finger, his touch commanding yet gentle, and leaned in. Her heart thundered as his lips brushed hers, soft at first, then firm, demanding. The world fell away, the cameras, the crew, the lie. There was only his mouth, warm and unyielding, and the way her body betrayed her, leaning into him, her hands gripping his jacket. He pulled back too soon, his eyes unreadable. The photographers cheered, oblivious to the storm brewing between them. Nia's lips tingled, her chest tight with something she didn't want to name. Kong stepped back, adjusting his cufflinks like nothing had happened. "Don't get used to it," he said under his breath, his voice cold again. "It's just for show." Her cheeks burned, not from embarrassment but from anger. She wanted to slap him, to wipe that smug look off his face, but she smiled instead, playing her part. Inside, she was a mess of fire and confusion. Later that night, alone in the penthouse, Nia couldn't shake the memory of his kiss. She paced the sleek living room, her bare feet sinking into the plush rug. The city lights sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but her mind was elsewhere. She'd overheard something earlier in the hallway outside Kang's office, that gnawed at her. His voice, low and dangerous, talking to someone on the phone. "The plan is in motion. Her family will pay for what they did." Her family. What did he mean? Nia's pulse raced as she replayed the words. She'd only caught fragments, not enough to piece together, but the venom in his tone chilled her. Was this marriage about more than business? Was it revenge? She poured herself a glass of water, her hands shaking. She needed answers, but Kong was a fortress, all sharp edges and locked doors. She couldn't trust him, not with that look in his eyes, not with the way his touch set her on fire despite his warnings. The door clicked open and she spun around. Kong stood there, still in his suit, his tie loosened, his hair slightly mussed. He looked less like a tycoon and more like a man who'd fought some internal battle and lost. His eyes found hers, and for a moment neither spoke. "You're still up," he said, his voice softer than before. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, crossing her arms. "Too much on my mind." He stepped closer, his gaze flickering over her silk robe, which did little to hide her curves. "Careful," he said, his voice dropping. "This place has a way of making people restless." She didn't back down, even as her heart raced. "Maybe it's not the place. Maybe it's you." He stopped, inches away, his eyes searching hers. The air crackled between them, heavy with unspoken words. She hated how her body responded to him, how her skin warmed under his gaze. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, and she froze, caught between wanting to pull away and wanting to lean in. Then he kissed her again. This time it wasn't for the cameras. It was raw, hungry. His hands gripping her waist as he pressed her against the counter. She kissed him back, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body arching into his. It was a mistake, a reckless plunge into something she couldn't control, but she didn't care. Not in that moment. He pulled back, his breathing ragged, his forehead resting against hers. "Don't mistake this for affection," he whispered, his voice rough, almost pained. Her heart sank, but she forced a smile, masking the sting. "Don't worry," she said, stepping back, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "I know exactly what this is." He watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the echo of his words and the heat of his touch. She sank onto the couch, her mind spinning. This marriage was a deal, a lifeline for Amara, but it was also a trap. Kong was hiding something, and she'd find out what, even if it meant playing his game, matching his fire with her own. She didn't know it yet, but that kiss was just the beginning. The real danger was still to come. The penthouse was a cage of glass and steel, its sleek surfaces reflecting the tension that simmered between Nia and Kong Jisoo. They'd been married for 2 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime of tiptoeing around landmines. Nia moved in as the contract demanded, her belongings sparse in the sprawling space that screamed Kang's wealth and control. Every night, she lay in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling, his words from their first kiss echoing in her mind. Asterisk, don't mistake this for affection. Asterisk, yet her body betrayed her, tingling at the memory of his lips, his hands, the way he'd claimed her in that fleeting moment. She hated him for it, and hated herself more for wanting it again. The charity gala was their first public outing as a married couple, a glittering event in a Seoul ballroom where chandeliers dripped light like honey. Nia wore a crimson gown that hugged her curves, its deep neckline drawing eyes from every corner of the room. She felt Kang's gaze on her as they entered, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. His touch was a brand, hot and heavy, and she fought the urge to lean into it. He looked devastating in a black tuxedo. His sharp features softened only slightly by the warm light, but his eyes were cold, scanning the room like a predator. "Smile," he murmured, his breath brushing her ear. "They're watching." She plastered on a smile, playing the perfect wife, but her heart raced with defiance. She wasn't here to be his doll. She was here for Amara, to save her sister from the debt that threatened to drown her. But every time Kang's fingers grazed her skin, her resolve wavered, and she cursed the heat pooling in her belly. The night took a turn when Nia found herself cornered by Park Miho, Kang's business rival. Miho was charming, his smile easy and warm, a stark contrast to Kang's icy demeanor. They stood near the bar, and Nia laughed at one of his jokes, her head tilting back, her eyes sparkling. It felt good to laugh, to feel human for a moment, free from the weight of her fake marriage. But when she glanced across the room, she saw Kong watching, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with something dark and dangerous. "Careful," Miho said, leaning closer, his voice teasing. "Your husband looks like he wants to burn this place down." Nia's smile faltered. She turned to meet Kang's stare, and the air crackled between them, charged with something more than anger. Jealousy. It was raw, unguarded, and it sent a thrill through her. She excused herself from Miho, her heart pounding, and made her way to Kong, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "What was that?" Kong asked when she reached him, his voice low, almost a growl. He grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt but firm enough to pull her close. "What was what?" she shot back, her chin lifting. "I was talking. Is that a crime now?" His eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer, his body crowding hers. "You were laughing with him," touching his arm. "Don't play games with me, Nia." Her pulse raced, anger and desire twisting together. "You don't own me, Jisoo. This is a contract, not a leash." His grip tightened for a split second before he released her, his expression unreadable. "Get in the car," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "We're leaving." The ride back to the penthouse was a storm waiting to break. They sat in the back seat of the sleek black sedan, the city lights streaking past, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Nia stared out the window, her arms crossed, trying to ignore the heat of Kang's presence beside her. His thigh brushed hers as the car turned, and her breath caught, her body betraying her again. She hated how he could unravel her with a single touch, a single look. Then his hand was on her knee, his fingers sliding up her thigh, slow and deliberate. She froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice shaky. He didn't answer, just leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. "You think you can flirt with another man and I'll just sit here?" His voice was rough, laced with something raw and possessive. His hand moved higher, slipping under the slit of her dress, his fingers grazing the sensitive skin of her inner thigh. Her breath hitched, and she grabbed his wrist, stopping him. "Don't," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Her body was screaming for him, her skin burning where he touched her. "Don't what?" he murmured, his lips hovering over hers, so close she could taste his breath. "Tell me you don't want this." She should have pushed him away. She should have reminded herself of his coldness, his secrets, the way he'd used her family's pain as leverage. But her body had other ideas. She kissed him, hard and desperate, her hands fisting in his jacket. The kiss was fire, all teeth and tongues, a clash of anger and need. He groaned into her mouth, his hands gripping her hips, pulling her onto his lap. The car's leather seats creaked as she straddled him, her dress riding up, his fingers digging into her thighs. "Nia," he growled, his lips trailing down her neck, his teeth grazing her skin. "You drive me insane." "Good," she gasped, her hands sliding under his shirt, feeling the hard planes of his chest. "You deserve it." The driver's partition was up, the world outside a blur, but none of it mattered. It was just them, tangled in a mess of heat and frustration, their bodies saying what their words couldn't. His hands roamed her back, pulling her closer, and she arched against him, lost in the storm of him. The car stopped too soon, and they pulled apart, both breathing hard, their eyes locked in a silent battle. "Get out," Kong said, his voice hoarse. "Before I do something we'll both regret." She climbed off him, her legs shaky, her lips swollen. She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but she just straightened her dress and stepped out into the cool night air, her heart a tangled mess. Back in the penthouse, Nia couldn't sleep. The memory of Kang's hands, his lips, his voice haunted her. But so did the questions. Why had he been so jealous? Why did he care? And what was the revenge plan she'd overheard him mention? She needed answers, and she wasn't going to wait for him to hand them over. While Kong was out the next day, Nia slipped into his study, her heart pounding. The room was all dark wood and sharp angles, a reflection of the man himself. She rifled through his desk, her hands trembling, until she found a locked drawer. Her modeling career had taught her a few tricks. Bobby pins weren't just for hair. She jimmied the lock, her breath catching as the drawer slid open. Inside was a file, thick and heavy. She opened it, and her world tilted. Photos spilled out, her smiling at a runway show, Amara laughing at a cafe, their late parents standing in front of their old family home in Ghana. Her stomach churned. Why did Kong have these? What did he want with her family? Her mind flashed to a memory she'd buried deep. Her father's late-night arguments, his secretive phone calls. He'd always said it was just business, but Amara had hinted at something darker, something tied to a deal gone wrong. And then there was Kang's past, a shadow she'd only glimpsed in his guarded moments. A woman had betrayed him, he'd once said, her voice bitter in his memory. A woman connected to Nia's family. Flashback, Kong was younger, his face softer, his eyes brighter. He stood in a dimly lit office, a woman's laughter filling the air. She was beautiful, her smile sharp like a knife. "You're too trusting, Jisoo," she'd said, her hand on his cheek. "That's why you'll lose." The next day, his company crumbled, his mother's health failed, and the woman vanished, leaving him with nothing but rage and a name, Nia's father. Nia snapped back to the present, her hands shaking as she clutched the photos. Kang's revenge wasn't just business. It was personal. And she was caught in the middle, her heart tangled with a man who might destroy her family to settle a score. She stuffed the file back into the drawer, her mind racing. She'd play his game for now, smile for the cameras, let him think he had the upper hand. But she was done being his pawn. She'd find the truth, protect Amara, and maybe, just maybe, break Kong Jisoo in the process. The penthouse had become a battlefield, every glance and touch between Nia and Kong loaded with unspoken truths. 3 weeks into their contract marriage, the air crackled with tension, a mix of desire and distrust that neither could escape. Nia lay awake at night, her body buzzing from the memory of their heated encounter in the car after the gala. Kang's hands on her thighs, his lips claiming hers with a hunger that felt too real for their fake marriage. It haunted her. But so did the file she'd found in his study, the photos of her, Amara, and their late parents staring back at her like ghosts. Kang was planning something, a revenge tied to her family, and she was determined to uncover it, even if it meant playing with fire. That night, the tension snapped. Nia stood in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine to steady her nerves, when Kang walked in. He'd shed his suit jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a sliver of tanned skin. His dark eyes locked on her, and she felt the familiar pull, like a tide dragging her under. She wore a simple silk slip, the fabric clinging to her curves, and his gaze lingered, hungry and unguarded. "You're up late," he said, his voice low, rough around the edges. He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne, cedar and spice, wrapping around her. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, her tone sharp to mask the way her heart raced. "Too many secrets in this house." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "Careful, Nia. Some secrets are better left alone." She set her glass down, her fingers trembling slightly. "Like the photos in your study." The words slipped out before she could stop them, her anger and curiosity overriding her caution. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he masked it. "You went through my things." His voice was dangerously soft, but he didn't move, his body tense, like a predator deciding whether to strike. "I'm your wife, aren't I?" she shot back, stepping closer, her chin lifted defiantly. "I wanted to know who I'm married to." He laughed, a low, bitter sound, and closed the distance between them. "You don't know what you're digging into." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, and her breath caught. "Those photos. Just research. I needed to know who I was marrying." "Liar," she whispered, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and something else, something that made her lean into his touch despite herself. His hand slid to her neck, his thumb grazing her pulse, which pounded under his touch. "You want the truth," he murmured, his lips inches from hers. "You're dangerous, Nia. You make me forget why I hate your family." Her heart stopped, then raced. His words were a confession, raw and unguarded, and they tore through her defenses. She should have pulled away, demanded answers about his revenge, about the photos, but her body had other plans. She grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer, and kissed him. The kiss was fire, a clash of need and frustration. He groaned, his hands gripping her hips, lifting her onto the counter. The silk slip rode up her thighs, and his fingers found her skin, hot and possessive. She arched into him, her hands sliding under his shirt, feeling the hard planes of his chest, the rapid beat of his heart. His lips moved to her neck, his teeth grazing her skin, and she gasped, her nails digging into his shoulders. "Jisoo," she breathed, his name a plea, a curse. She hated how much she wanted him, how her body betrayed her every time he touched her. He pulled back, his eyes dark with desire, but there was something else there. Vulnerability, a crack in his armor. "This doesn't change anything," he said, his voice hoarse. "We're still playing a game." "Then let's play," she whispered, pulling him back to her lips claiming his again. They moved to the bedroom, a blur of hands and heat, shedding clothes like secrets. He pressed her against the sheets, his body covering hers, and for the first time, it wasn't just lust. It was something deeper, something that scared them both. He kissed her slowly now, his hands exploring her with a reverence that made her chest ache. "You're going to ruin me," he murmured against her skin, his voice breaking. She wanted to believe him, to think he felt something real, but the photos, the secrets, lingered in her mind. She pushed the thoughts away, losing herself in him, in the way he moved, the way he made her feel alive. When it was over, they lay tangled in the sheets, their breathing heavy, the silence heavy with unspoken words. She wanted to ask about his hate, his plans, but she stayed quiet, her heart a tangled mess of hope and fear. The next morning, Nia sat across from Amara in a quiet cafe. Her sister's eyes red from crying. Amara's voice was barely a whisper as she spoke. "Nia, I found something in Dad's old stuff. He was mixed up in some bad business. Shady deals, people he owed money to. I think it's why I got scammed. It's all connected." Nia's stomach dropped. "Connected how?" she asked, her voice tight. Amara shook her head, her hands trembling. "I don't know. But Kang's name came up in some papers. His family. They lost everything because of Dad's deals. Or someone close to him." Nia's mind raced, the pieces clicking together. Kang's revenge, the photos, his cryptic words about her family. It was all tied to her father's past. She hugged Amara, promising to fix it, but inside she was reeling. Kang wasn't just a cold businessman. He was a man driven by pain, and she was caught in the crossfire. Back at the penthouse, Nia dug deeper. She waited until Kang was out, then slipped back into his study. Her heart pounded as she searched his desk again, her fingers brushing over papers and folders. She found another file, hidden beneath a stack of contracts, and her breath caught as she opened it. Documents, emails, plans. Kang's revenge laid bare. He wanted to destroy her family's name, to drag their legacy through the mud and take over their old company, a small textile business her father had built before his death. He'd been buying up shares, spreading rumors, planning a public scandal to ruin them forever. Her hands shook as she read, her eyes burning with tears. She'd started to feel something for him, something real, but this was a reminder of who he was. A man who'd married her to hurt her, to use her. She closed the file, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't let him win. She'd play his game, use his desire against him, and protect her family at all costs. That night, Nia waited for him in the bedroom, her heart a storm of anger and determination. She wore a black lace dress, the kind that left little to the imagination, her hair loose around her shoulders. When Kang walked in, his eyes darkened, his breath catching as he took her in. "Nia," he said, his voice rough, already stepping toward her. She smiled, slow and deliberate, crossing the room to him. "No talking tonight," she murmured, her hands sliding up his chest, pushing his jacket off. She kissed him, hard and hungry, pouring every ounce of her anger, her hurt, her need into it. He groaned, his hands gripping her waist, pulling her against him. She led him to the bed, taking control, her movements bold and unyielding. She straddled him, her lips trailing down his jaw, his neck, her hands unbuttoning his shirt with a fierceness that matched the fire in her chest. He tried to speak, to say her name, but she silenced him with another kiss, her body moving against his in a way that left no room for words. It was different this time, more intense, more desperate. She wasn't just seducing him. She was claiming him, marking him, making him hers even as she planned to tear his world apart. He surrendered to her, his hands trembling as they roamed her body. His eyes locked on hers like she was the only thing that mattered. When it was over, they lay in the dark, his arm around her, her head on his chest. His breathing was uneven, his voice soft as he whispered, "What are you doing to me, Nia?" She smiled, her heart twisting with a mix of triumph and pain. She'd found his plan, his weakness, and she'd use it. But as she lay there, his warmth seeping into her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was falling for him, harder and faster than she'd ever planned. Did you enjoy the story? If you did, please subscribe to my channel, Jade Lantern Stories, to show your support. It really helps me keep making more stories for you. Thank you so much. See you in our next update.